This is a lecture from Open Tuition. To benefit from the lecture, you should download the free lecture notes from opentuition.com.
Okay, let's carry on and look at paragraph 7, budget styles. And the two styles of budgeting, you've got there top-down and bottom-up. Top-down budgeting is where the budgets are prepared by senior management and simply imposed, given to the junior managers. So, if I'm in charge, I'll do the budgets, and then I'll give each individual manager their budget and tell them this is what you've got to do. Human resources, I've budgeted that we need 1,000 employees. Fine, that's their job. I am telling them what to do. Whereas bottom-up or participatory is where I actually involve the managers. Effectively, I ask them to prepare their own budgets. I give them guidance, but I ask them to prepare their own budgets. And my job is both to, if you like, check them, challenge them, check their budgets are reasonable, and make sure they coordinate. Back to something I said ages ago, there's not much point in budgeting to produce 10,000 units of a product if we're only going to be capable of selling 5,000 units. So those are the two. Top down, it's imposed on the management, the junior managers. Bottom up, they're actually involved, effectively preparing their own budgets. Exercise 2, how department managers like to feel when budget figures are imposed rather than agreed with them. Some managers actually might like it. There's some people who are scared of making decisions themselves and rather like to be told what to do. But generally, these days, it's regarded as being demotivating. That if you were actually involved in producing the budgets, you're more likely to feel the budgets are realistic, you're more likely to be motivated to try and hit budget, beat budget, if only for a matter of pride. Can you suggest any arguments in favour of top-down budgeting? Or any problems that may arise with bottom-up? Well, there aren't really many arguments in favour of top-down. Certainly, it stands to be quicker. If I'm sat there doing the budgets, it's going to be much quicker than dealing with each individual manager and consulting and getting them to do budgets and so on. So if the budgets do need, for some reason, to be prepared in a hurry, then maybe top-down may be better. One other problem, which we'll talk a bit more about on, I think it's the next page, a problem with bottom-up is that if I'm in charge, I do need to challenge the managers properly. There's always a danger that if I ask you to do me a budget for wages, labour, you reckon it's going to cost us 5,000 a month. But if you know you're going to be measured on, are you paying more or less than 5,000 a month? You might think, oh, well, I'll put in the budget that we need 6,000 a month because I know we only need 5,000 and I can easily beat budget, and perhaps I'll get a bonus. So there is that danger of people, that's called budget padding, but I'll say more on the next page. But there is that danger that if I'm not very careful as top management, if I don't challenge them, that they may fiddle the budgets, if you see what I mean. So it's up to me to question them hard and say, well, why do you need 6,000? It was only this much last year. Why is it so much this year? And so on. I need to be aware of that sort of problem. C, I've effectively answered. Where might a top-down approach be the best method? I think it's never really the best method, but it may be the only alternative if we do have to do the budgets in a rush, or if it's a very small company, then it's less of a problem. Behavioural aspects. Several things here. First of all, budgets are generally used as targets we measure managers' performance as to how well they perform as against the budget. And more often than not, it's linked to a reward system. They get a bonus if they beat budget, sort of thing. And so we've got to make sure we've got sensible targets, sensible budgets, that they are achievable. There's no point, you know, if a manager, when I spoke about labour, if the manager responsible knows we're going to need 5,000 a month, but the budget says 4,000 a month, well, the manager knows there's got absolutely no chance of achieving it and gives up even trying. It doesn't bother. So we've got to be very careful, as I've written there. Good targets, they should be agreed in advance so the managers know what they're being measured on. Depending on factors controllable by the individual, it's only fair to measure them on things that they control. Obviously, they've got to be measurable. You know, you may give a manager a target of improving quality, but that on its own is not enough. Otherwise, you know, at the end of the year, I say quality's not gone up, and you say it has gone up. How do we prove it? So we need to decide how we're actually going to measure quality. Is it going to be based on number of complaints or number of goods returned, whatever? But something we can measure, and then we can say, it's got better, it's got worse. It's normally linked to a reward system to help and motivate them. You know, the greater extent you beat the target, the bigger the bonus, the bigger the reward you get. And of course, we want to make sure that we're giving them targets that benefit the company as a whole, because the manager is going to be concerned with their targets. They don't care about the effect on the company. They care about their bonus. So we've got to make sure, you know, we're giving them targets that benefit the company. Other page, behavioural aspects. I mentioned one of these earlier when I mentioned budget padding, but as you can see, some unintended consequences that can occur if we're not very careful about the way our budget system operates. First one, using more resources than necessary, ensuring all the budget is spent. A lot of people misunderstand what we mean by budgets. They think the budget is telling you how much you can spend. I know a girl who works for the municipality, for one of the city councils, and in their budget there's an amount for flowers. I don't know, I'm making up figures, I can't remember. Let's say $100 a month for flowers for the office. And the other year they came to December, the end of their year, and they realised they'd not been spending enough. You know, they'd only be spending $50 a month or something. And so in the last month they thought, oh, well, we'll spend the rest of it. So they spent the whole budget, filled the office with flowers, which is sort of missing the whole point. The budget didn't mean they should spend that much. It meant, you know, that's the maximum they should spend, really. We hope they spend less. And of course, one of the reasons people do that is they think, oh, if we don't spend it all this year, they'll give us less next year. So we've got to be careful. It's an unintended consequence, you know, and it's down to education, explaining to them what budgets mean, what they're there for, motivating them to beat budget. And again, if I'm in charge, me challenging, you know, why do you need this much? Making the bonus whatever it takes. This relates to mention of goal congruence on the previous page. Let me give you a little example. I used to be in charge of an office for a teaching company. Teaching company has offices throughout the UK, in all the major cities, and I was in charge of one of the cities. And we had various targets which we had to achieve. But just suppose a target was to get more students. That's a great target, obviously. The more students we get, the more money we make. It seems obvious. But suppose I were to tell you I'm in one city, there's another city 30, 40 kilometres away with another office. Well, my target is to get more students. If the way I manage to get more students is by charging less than the office nearby, so that I was stealing their students, well, that's not good for the company at all. All right, if I was told get more students, you'll get a bonus, fine, I'll get more students. But again, if all those students, my extra ones, just mean fewer students in the other office, well, that's not good for the company at all. You know, you've got to be very, very careful about how the targets are designed. Competing against other divisions, same sort of thing. We don't want them competing, we want them working together with other divisions, departments. Inaccurate forecast, budget padding, this is the one I did refer to on the previous page. When managers are involved in the budgeting, deliberately budgeting more than they know they need. Because if they can get away with it, they're sort of guaranteed to perform well. Because the budget itself was unrealistic, it was too high. And again, there's no cure. If I'm in charge, I need to be aware of that problem. Take account of it when I'm questioning them, when I'm challenging them. Are their figures reasonable? Meeting the target but not beating it. It's a behavioural problem. Some people think their job is simply to make sure we don't spend more than budget, but of course, as far as costs are concerned, ideally we want them to spend less than budget. But that's back to partly educating them, but also motivating them, tying it in with a reward system, that the more they beat budget, the more reward they'll get. Avoiding risks. There's always a danger. A manager got a decision to make which may do wonderfully for the company, but there is a risk it may not work, and that they'll, as a result, they'll not achieve the budget. And so it's all too often they avoid taking any risks at all because they just want a nice, steady job. They just want to make sure they meet or hopefully beat budget and get the bonus. Too many are just not prepared to take a risk, even though they may end up benefiting. And of course, that's not necessarily good for the company. Over the page, the final bit is something called beyond budgeting. And what this is, I'm not going to read all the way through this, just let me explain. A lot of people have written about this in recent years. It's becoming more popular. Budgets, they take a lot of time to prepare. It's expensive because of the time. And of course, they almost inevitably go rapidly out of date. However well the budget may be prepared, you may have budgeted assuming we were going to put wages up by 5%. Economic factors may change. You may be forced to put wages up by 10%, and immediately the budget is wrong. And people say, well, what's the benefit of budgets? If it's costing so much to produce them, and if you're going to go out of date anyway, what's the point? Beyond budgeting essentially says stop doing budgets. If there's no benefit, there's no point. You know, most companies do budgets because we've always done budgets. But there's no point in doing them unless you're getting a benefit. And so essentially, as I said, beyond budgeting says stop doing budgets. Waste of time. And look at the criticisms. It's time consuming, it's costly because of the time. I just said that. It constrains responsibility and flexibility. You know, the budget says, we're going to produce so many units of this product, so many units of that product, so many units of this product. Well, circumstances change. Circumstances change. It may be demand goes up a lot for one of the products and down a lot for another one, and we should switch things round. But it's not always that easy. If the budget says this, the budget says that. That's what we're supposed to do. It's rarely strategically focused. The budgets are for 1 year only. Got the chance of a new product. A new product, which in later years is likely to make a lot of money, but the first year will perhaps lose money, you know, because it needs a lot of development and advertising and things. There's always that danger. If you look into a 1 year budget, you'll say, oh, we're not prepared to do this product, it loses money, despite the fact that in later years it's likely to make money. It adds little value. What benefit do we really get from it? It concentrates on reducing costs, not creating value. You know, so the budget, so much of it is the costs, and the costs are the targets, and we want the managers to spend less. Strengthen vertical control and command if it's top-down budgeting. I've said bottom-up is generally regarded as better these days, but if we have top-down budgeting, there is this lack of motivation, imposing. Encourage suboptimal behaviour in order to meet targets, I've already mentioned that. Updated too infrequently to be relevant. Companies do, a lot of companies, many companies, regularly update their budgets, perhaps every 3 months. And update it for things that have changed, but is that often enough? Unsupported assumptions, estimates and guesses, obviously, they're all forecasts. We can never budget accurately. Reinforce department barriers. People feel undervalued. You know, all year you're being watched and measured against this budget. You're being controlled to stick to big people. And that's why, because all those criticisms of standard budgeting, back to where I started, if we're not getting much benefit from it, then what's the point in spending all this time and money preparing it? The big problem, of course, before we look at the other criticisms, is how we're going to measure performance. You know, that's one major use of budgets generally. We can measure by comparing what actually happens with the budget. How are we going to measure performance if there's no budget there? What Beyond Budgeting says is we need to measure performance, but it's much better to measure it in a benchmarking way. Banks. There are a lot of big banks, certainly Scandinavia, who operate beyond budgeting, and they've got obviously various branches all doing an identical job. And when they come to measure the managers at each of these branches, instead of comparing it with the budget, they compare with other branches. So it's more up to date, you know, circumstances have changed, they've changed for all the branches. But when we come to measure, compare the branches, benchmark. Don't compare with an out-of-date budget. Or even compare with similar companies. It may be difficult to get agreement, but both companies stand to benefit. A similar company, if we can share certain elements of information about performance and compare with this other company. I say there's confidentiality problems there, but both companies benefit because both companies are, you know, trying to improve. So there we are. Principles of Beyond Budgeting. Measure success relative to the competition and not against internally focused budget. Targets linked to shareholders' value. Responsibility delegated, frontline teams, communication. I'm not going to read through all of this, I'm not, because I think it's all fairly common sense. Advantages, faster response time. We can change, we're not constrained. You know, so as I'm thinking, we currently make 3 products. We've budgeted on making 3 products. Well, it's all planned out. But during the year, we suddenly see, oh, a new product has appeared. Perhaps we should make this. Looks very good. But we don't, because it wasn't in the budget. And to make this new one, I'd need labour, and labour's already budgeted, you know, to be making the current 3 products. It's difficult to change and to do new things because everything's so planned out. Improve staff development, enhance communication, better customer relationships, better supply relationships. We can change. We're not constrained by this fixed plan, this budget. More accurate forecasts, fresh outlook, fits in with TQM, business process engineering. We've been through all of that. Finally though, although, well, if I got the idea across, I think you can see the potential benefits and why it's more companies are adopting this idea. There are drawbacks, problems. Nothing in life is perfect. One is it's going to be a big exercise changing from the current idea of traditional budgeting to this beyond budgeting. You know, we've got to decide how we're going to measure and performance and things. And so the changeover itself needs expertise, training, time, money, even if there are these benefits in the future. I said about performance measurement being more benchmarking, but that can end up being more demotivating. That you're always looking over your shoulder, you're always looking at the other department, the other office. Again, it's a complete change of thought process which managers might find difficult to adapt to. And of course, things like one of the reasons for budgeting was planning, you know, planning ahead, how many staff we need, that sort of thing. Well, you can't just eliminate all planning. We can't just recruit staff on the day because we decide we need them today. So, think about it. It's, I say, it's a modern idea, and it does have its attractions. It is becoming more popular.